were trying to get something done, you had a long list, and then all of a sudden you decided to sit down and start consuming corn. Corn is a great resource that you find all over the Midwest. It seems that our economy is centered around it, but we're talking about a different kind of corn. You started that young, you had homework, you had something to work on, and you decided to procrastinate and do something completely different. To reference my video from before, you essentially were seeking comfort. Consuming corn, just like eating or doing any bodily function that involves relaxing and comfort, is part of the parasympathetic system, which is involved with rest and digest. Because we're creatures of habit and we decide to always go the easiest route, and we decide to take the path that best fits that, consuming corn is part of this behavioral pattern. Let me tell you that all you did wasn't just getting in the way of doing tasks. Of course, manifesting requires an active portion where you actually decide to take a step forward and do actions in order to obtain what you want the universe to give you. So it wasn't just getting in the way of that. Imagine you have an exam the next day and all you could think about is consuming corn. And what will happen is that will prevent you studying for the exam and obtaining an A. There are real life consequences. The reason why we often try to consume corn is that it's based on a dopaminergic pathway. By having that in your life, you're producing more dopamine, and each time you seek that and you obtain that, you're rewarding yourself. Consuming corn is actually directly related with lack of focus and lack of attention. And this is what we're going to target today. In the last video, I talked about comfort and how comfort is getting in the way of manifestation. Both in the passive part of manifestation and the active part, we are required to place our attention to what our goal is. So you have dopamine goes up and then eventually it precipitates. And when it precipitates, you're not feeling good, you may feel depressed, low energy, so you seek the behavior again in order to obtain the next dose of dopamine. And in addition to that, we have a lot of distractors. That will be social media, for instance, looking at videos for 10 seconds, 5 seconds, moving on to the next one. All of those activities actually destroy your ability of producing dopamine naturally and in a way that is healthy for you and prevents you from focusing. Let's dive deep into this connection between manifestation and focus. Whether you're doing spell work, ritual, or you're just meditating, and what you always want to do is to pay attention to what you're looking for. In the sacred text and in any esoteric book, you're told that whenever you're working towards some kind of result, you have to pay attention to how you're requesting things, how your body and mind and soul are feeling at the moment of your request. And that may include focusing on your goal for a specific period of time. If your mind is scattered and your attention is going into 1,000 different places, you will not be able to manifest. On the contrary, you may actually manifest what you don't want. You may manifest the opposite. Let's say you're trying to manifest a sofa chair. It seems like that's the chair of your dreams. One day you decide to prepare a ritual. You're 1 week away from the full moon and you decide that the full moon is actually the best day for you to do your ritual. So you prepare everything that you need. You go to the local store, you get some instruments, you get candles, oils, crystals, you put together a really nice ritual. During the preparation process, your attention to the ultimate goal is actually extremely important, because as you're prepared everything, if your mind is scattered and going into 1,000 different places, you're not going to be able to manifest that. already a week prior, during the actual preparation, you're required to pay attention to your goal. And in this case, the goal is the sofa chair that you've been looking at for years. The next step is that we're approaching the full moon. Now we have the ritual together. During this portion, you're dealing with both the passive and active side of manifestation. When we say passive, you're preparing your own body, and that's actually your feminine energy. When we say you need to get in touch with your feminine side, that's what we mean. So essentially, your body needs to act as an empty vessel. That's why in the sacred text, many times before the preparation for a ritual or for a really strong spell, many times we actually prepare physically by fasting. And we don't fast just from food. We fast from bad habits. So that includes anything like smoking, alcohol, consuming too much corn. Of course, that's not good for your health. That's another thing that could prevent you from obtaining your goal. So you're preparing your empty vessel. It's actually, if you're doing anything like intermittent fasting, that's probably a good idea to do that for 12 to 14 hours right before a ritual, because that actually prepares your body. So your body as a vessel has to be ready for this energy to come in. The ritual, the spoken word, what we would call the verb if we are using Christian terminology, the spoken word, the spell work, is actually what makes the active portion, the more masculine portion of the ritual. When that's happening, your attention should be on the sofa chair. You're imagining the color of the chair is this baby blue. You're imagining the fabric. You're imagining sitting on it. And you're also imagining how it feels to sit on that chair, to touch it, to use all of your senses. If you're doing that and you're combining that with the spoken word is actually helpful with manifesting, because you're speaking something into existence. So you're not just thinking about it, thinking needs to precede that, but then you're actively speaking that into existence. That's your creative divine power that you're working with. I always suggest when we burn candles, for instance, as part of the ritual, and by the way, those are just instruments, you don't have to use any of it. Expert practitioners actually just use their mind, maybe their spoken word, chanting, but they don't necessarily spend hundreds of dollars in candles and crystals and all of these instruments that they're good to work with because they're part of the physical and we're trying to manifest something in the physical realm. They don't just work with energy, but they also work with our psyche and the way we perceive it. But they're not necessary. In my practice, I started with all of those instruments and slowly I've been clearing out the instruments and try to work more with my mental abilities and emotional abilities rather than focusing on the physical realm and other things that I can obtain to make the ritual look pretty. Of course, that's part of it, and you can still do it, and I recommend doing it. But it's not always necessary. Once you put it together, you burn in the candle. I stated before that the first half of the candle is your energy is actually going to the upper realms. Everything in metaphysics is based on the Hermetic principles, as above, so below. As within, so without. So as the candle is burning, your manifestation is actually speaking into the higher realms. In the higher realms, we find elevated entities, entities of light, entities that belong to different dimensions. And that also includes our higher self. It may include our ancestors, our spirit guides. So as we're speaking that desire, it goes up into their dimension, it gets received, and then in the next portion, the second half of the candle, is when the desire starts manifesting into the real world. There are many times when we do a ritual, like in the case of the sofa chair, you may just do one. It will be one and done. Make sure that you have full attention when you're preparing it. Make sure that you also have full attention when you're doing the ritual. And then it becomes a waiting game. You don't want to think about it. Manifestation gives you what you're focusing on. So if your goal is money, work, love, manifestation will give you that if you're focusing on it. The problem happens when we're focusing on it too much, when it becomes a constant daily thought. And many times the negative emotion, negative feelings will go into it. And now you're speaking two languages to the universe. It becomes chaotic, and you will not manifest what you need to manifest. You will manifest the opposite, or even the appearance of the opposite. So it's really important that you maintain this focus, and it has to be targeted in specific areas. We have rituals that we want to repeat for 7 days, 3 days, sometimes a whole month. It depends on what you're asking for. But each time you do the ritual, the spell work, you want to ensure that your attention is fully there. Consuming corn prevents you from having that kind of attention, prevents you from being able and proficient with visualizing. Your visualization will be all over the place. You will be focusing on one thing, and then your attention will shift to another one. Consuming corn will get in the way of this process because your intentions will be mixed. You may start focusing on what you're requesting, and then all of a sudden your attention will shift. You will try to visualize the chair, and all of a sudden your thoughts will go towards work, maybe towards the corn itself or other things. So it will split your attention. So in order for you to manifest, many times you're required to fast, and that's not just a physical fast from food. That is also a fast from habits that could scatter your focus. On the other hand, I don't want to be pessimistic about this entire field. On the other hand, I don't want to be pessimistic about this entire field. We have plenty of spiritual, religious practitioners out there that have this continuous campaign against it. I believe that in life, everything requires moderation. If you're consuming corn, that should be within a paradigm where it's part of a healthy habit. It could be done once a week, maybe for a specific time, maybe for 15 minutes, 30 minutes, and then you stop. Then you go do something different. Because if you are unable to control this habit, and this is something that happens daily and is taking hours, what will happen is that it's not only affecting your manifestation, but it's also affecting your productivity. It's affecting the way you interact with other people. Many times we expect our societal interactions to be based on what we watched. And that cannot be healthy. However, I don't believe in a complete ban of it. Of course, there are people out there that have made a living out of it, and there's clearly no judgment on this hand. But at the same time, I always advise moderation. It's not just with this. It could be moderation has to be with food, moderation has to be with comfort, moderation has to be with excessive work, and not people will overwork themselves. Moderation has to be with sleep. Some people don't sleep enough, some people sleep too much. I suggest that you keep a calendar where you write down your day-to-day activities. And if you realize, and it doesn't have to be corn, it could be social media, it could be TV, it could be any of that. If you realize that too much of your time is spent towards a specific habit, it may be a good idea to get back the moderation, stop chasing comfort, and start chasing your dreams.